Well, good morning, committee. It's Tuesday, April 20th, and this is the agricultural meeting, and we're going to be running through some amendments that our legislative counsel, Michael O'Grady, who's with us, drafted up in regards to H 434. And I don't know, before we start, if you folks got a note from Maddie in regards to some language changes or not, but I think you did, right, Linda?
Yes, and I put them, this was her testimony from before, so I put it on your webpage for today.
Yeah.
I looked that over.
Yeah. And so we'll let Michael get started on changes that we'd made last week, and we'll run through those changes and see how those fit into the bill. Morning, Michael.
Good morning. So the revised draft is on your committee website. I know you like to walk through it individually. So assuming that everybody has it up, I'll just start walking through the changes. Okay.
Yeah.
So last week you requested some specific changes, and then you also asked me to get some revisions from the Agency of Agriculture. And the first change on page 1, line 13 through 16, is a revision requested by the Agency of Agriculture. The original language, according to the agency, was confusing people, and that language had them prioritizing and coordinating recommendations of the Soil Health Payment for Ecosystems Working Group, the Vermont Climate Council, and other relevant recommendations. So they have proposed that the language be changed to review historic recommendations for pesticide reduction in the state and coordinate with existing work groups to avoid submitting to the General Assembly conflicting policy recommendations on the regulation of pesticides and farming. Should I move forward?
Are there any, Chris has a question, I believe. Chris?
I guess I don't understand the conflicting policy recommendations, because in some ways the policy could evolve, and so it would be conflicting with historic policy. Michael, what do you understand this to mean?
Well, there's definitely opportunity with the number of councils and working groups out there that there could be conflicting policy recommendations from the different groups. You know, for example, the Ecosystem Services Working Group could recommend incentives to do certain farming practices, whilst the Climate Council might recommend against certain farming practices. And so who is the entity that's going to be reviewing those for the purposes of kind of providing a coordinated recommendation to you?
And what they're suggesting is that they would judge those different proposals and move it forward, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And it doesn't prohibit you from getting the recommendations of the various groups. It's just now you have an entity that kind of tries to coordinate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a problem with that, Chris?
Oh, I got a problem. No. I mean, I think if I missed Friday, so I'm catching up a little bit, but it just, I didn't understand. I don't have a problem. Existing working groups, that's just an understanding that it's the whole universe.
Yeah.
Well, it could be refined to be existing working groups on agriculture or agricultural practices. Do you know if you want further refinement?
But see, I think when we talked about, you know, what the heck, if there's a group out there that, then we can change it, or whoever's doing the ag stuff. Yep. Okay, Michael, I think we'll move on to are we down to section 2?
Yeah, I think do you just want me to review changes, or do you want me to review the whole bill?
Well, we may have some more changes that we've got to do, a final draft, and then we would go right through it, you know, section by section.
Okay, so I'll focus on the changes right now.
I think so, and then we'll back up.
Okay. So the next change is on page 2. It's in the authority of the board to assume the treated articles regulation. Previously, the reference to the standard by which the treated articles are regulated was included. You didn't really need that because it's embedded in the treated articles section later in law. And so this is really just a consolidation for conciseness. It doesn't change the board's authority, and it doesn't change the standard of authority by which treated articles are regulated.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think, Corey, you talked, see, this stuff we did Friday, I think, Chris, and yeah.
Okay, moving down page 2, line 13 and 14. This is actually a change I made by myself because in the House, it became clear that the term biostimulants really needs to be plant biostimulants in order to comply with federal law. So this is just to maintain consistency with S102 and with federal law.
Yep.
Okay.
Any questions? No? Good.
Then the next change in subdivision 9 is a recommendation from the Agency of Agriculture. Previously, subdivision 9 had said, explore developing standards for a Vermont agricultural marketing program that sets standards for carbon capture, plastic use, and organic product selection. The agency wanted to refine that a little bit to say, explore methods and standards for transitioning farmers to alternative practices that reduce pesticide usage. To focus more on the pesticide specific activities and not about plastics and carbon capture, etc.
And I think Margaret Lagus may have sent some language in regards to the plastic issue. I don't know if you saw that. I think it came over the weekend. Linda, did you have a copy of that?
Not if it came over the weekend, no.
Well, you can proceed, Michael. I'll just look and see if I got
Okay, I
something
think
here from Margaret.
So
Pardon?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
So I can understand the organization shift you're talking about, but do we not have any desire to have a carbon sequestration language anywhere in here? I mean, it seems like a lot of Vermont's potential around climate has everything to do with ag, and I think we should name it if we want to shift the way we organize it. I'm open to that, but
well, it should be, yes, because there should be some real carbon credits coming eventually So it should be, shouldn't that be in here, Michael, or is it in here somewheres?
It's currently not in here. If you want it to be in here, that's your policy decision.
Well, I think if we don't start making some noise about that, it won't. I mean, I doubt if natural resources is gonna help us with it, so. You know, it should be in here if we're gonna start pushing people in that direction for credit sometime. Chris?
What about a duplicate of number 9 that says explore methods and standards for farming practices that, help sequester carbon, or, just something. It's not, we're just asking that it be on the list. I would hate to see it not be on the list.
Okay. Should I add that?
Yeah, I think that'll blend in there. Hi, Bum.
This is a little picky, but on line 18 here, where it says methods and standards for transitioning farmers to alternative practices that reduce pesticide usage, couldn't we just say transitioning farmers to practices that reduce pesticide usage?
Yep, you could.
It's a good catch. See, the bill I have in front of me isn't numbered on the side. It's actually a bill. What section are you in, Chris?
Section 1. We're you want us to email you it's on our website, but what Michael has a highlighted draft. It might be handy for you to have, Mr. Chair.
Linda sent that by email earlier, Bobby.
Yeah, well, that's what I have, but I don't have the little numbers like line such and such, but I got all the sections and the numbers, so.
So our Senator Starr, are you looking at it on an iPad?
Yes.
So if you hit open in Word, you should be able to see the line numbers.
I don't see where you hit open.
Did you see?
See, it doesn't go over far enough to the
Okay.
right, but I'm fine. Just say what section and the number. But
Okay.
I see where Chris is. Yeah, that would fit in there fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Should then I move on?
yeah,
On Friday, you asked that the authority and the responsibilities of the Seed Review Committee be consolidated with the Agriculture Innovation Board. So the authority of the Seed Review Committee to review the seed traits of new genetically engineered seed proposed for sale, distribution, or use in the state is moved here. There is a question that will come up later on about whether or not the Seed Review Committee still has that authority to approve new genetically engineered seeds. I just moved the Seed Review Committee's authority over. I may not have understood the committee's request entirely, but I just wanted to flag that for you all.
yeah. We talked about moving all of that into this innovation board because they're going to be reviewing everything anyway, so they may as well review that. But no, so then we'll deal with the rest of that later.
Yep, in a minute.
Yeah,
And then you come to the organization of the board. You had changed some of the membership. You reduced it overall from 14 members to 13 members. And then you asked for some clarifying changes and then some members to be removed from the board and others to be added. So the first thing you did is referring to a representative of the organic farming community, instead of it saying a member of the farming community who practices organic farming, it's now a member of an organization representing the organic farming community. So that could be Maddie, it could be a farmer, it could be someone from rural Vermont. So there's options there.
Yeah, opens it up broader.
Okay. That same. Okay. That
Yeah.
same change was made for the member of the dairy industry, instead of it saying a member of the public representing the dairy industry. It's a member of an organization representing the dairy industry in Vermont. I think that provides the same flexibility. So you could have Jackie from the Farm Bureau, or Bill Rao. So there are options there.
Yeah,
Similar change is made in a member of an organization representing fruit and vegetable farmers, and a member of an organization representing grass-based non-dairy livestock farming.
yeah. And Chris, you weren't with us when we talked about that, but it was to broaden the scope of who might be eligible to sit on the board. Yeah.
And does, is there a way that a farmer, I mean, you can become a member of NOFA, for instance, but can they, who nominates these people?
So the Secretary of Agriculture is the one who appoints everyone who's non-ex officio to the board. So the secretary is going to be the one consulting with these organizations and appointing someone. Secretary definitely has the ability to appoint a farmer that's a member of any of these organizations.
Yeah, and it's really up to the organization. They'll have a meeting amongst themselves and put hopefully their best foot forward with who would represent their group in the best way.
And I suppose they'll come kicking and screaming to us if they feel they've been
Yeah,
slighted.
any other questions? No,
Could I just ask, the agency here gets the secretary, they get the director of the agrochemical program. Is that Carrie right now?
I think it's technically Kanika.
Okay, and then the water quality, that's Ryan.
Ryan Patch.
Yeah, and we had, Ryan got taken out, and we felt that with his expertise and knowledge, he should be on this panel. And so that's how we got down to 12, but then we talked about him not being there and said, well, golly, we're gonna miss a very knowledgeable individual. So we put that back in, and that got us back up to an odd number plus 13. So, okay, good. We'll move ahead.
Okay.
Michael?
So I wanted to note on page 3, line 18, subdivision H, previously it said a certified crop consultant or soil biologist, but you wanted the soil biologist and the crop consultant to be 2 individual members. So you will see on page 4, line 5, that the soil biologist is an independent member of the board, and the biologist replaced, it struck the member of the public with experience in agriculture water quality regulation.
And we talked about, remember that the gentleman that talked with us Tom, I think it's Tom Eden. And we felt that a person with that kind of expertise would be really good on this board to talk about, the way equipment works and what crops need what type of fertilizers and we thought that would be a real asset to have both a person like him and the soil scientists on the board. Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, Michael, the very first line on page 4 says representing fruit and vegetable farmers. Should it be fruit or vegetable farmers?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably, because a couple of the orchard organizations are really just fruit farmers. So, okay.
Good there. Yep.
I got my picky lenses on today.
Well,
Okay.
it gave you quite a lot of credit on the Senate floor today and really pumped you up, but you deserved all of that. But don't don't overplay it.
So I will move on. In the previous draft, there had been a member from an organization involved in land conservation, and you asked to have that position struck. And then you asked to have the member of the environmental advocacy organization to be refined to be someone with knowledge of pesticide or toxic substance regulation. So it's now a member of an environmental organization that advocates for policy regarding the management or reduction of toxic substances in the state.
Yep. Corey?
I still, the whole membership, I'm just still trying to wrap my head around. I know we made the change in dairy, but I almost wonder if we should add conventional dairy there, or is that implied because we have the organic dairy? But I could also see someone could say, potentially if they're making the assignment, put in 2 organic dairy representatives, because dairy is broad, right? Includes organic and conventional.
It does.
So I want to make sure we're, spelling that out. And then my concern that I'm still just juggling in my head is someone from a co-op is going to have a different perspective than a farmer on the ground or an organization. So, not that I don't want, the co-ops taken here, but, I want to make sure we're representing the view of an on the ground dairy farmer here. So I don't know I don't know how we want to juggle that, but those are just my thoughts.
Well, if we were I think the other day when we dealt with this, we were trying to keep all the groups consistent.
Yeah, no, I know.
I don't know how you can tighten that up to, you could put an organization representing a conventional or the conventional dairy industry or something like that. Chris?
Well, I kind of like what Corey's saying because I had the same concern. But what about if B and I were as they are, but ended with or a farmer in the dairy, or a dairy farmer at the end one, or an organic farmer? Because we sort of I think we all think it'll be a farmer, but we're talking about the organizations. So maybe that's a way. That doesn't address the organic question that Sarah Parent has, but that might be getting close to a way to deal with that in both lines, treat them the same.
That wouldn't make it sound even more divided, though. if you talk about like an organic farmer belongs to rural Vermont, it could be I don't know, or farmer, then you're saying, well, send a person that belongs to the organization. And then at the end, you can say, but if that doesn't work, or a farmer, and I don't know. Any other thoughts on that
I mean, just
language?
the way I read it now is you'd send someone from an organization. You wouldn't necessarily reach out to an individual farmer. And that's reading it extremely literally. But I've learned in my time that happens. And so I'd hate to have this whole group put together and we don't actually have a farmer. We have an executive director of this and an executive director of that. And we don't have anyone who's actually putting any of these
working
land. And so I get why we wanted to streamline, but I'm just having, thoughts here is, can we phrase it a little better? Because I want farmers on this, actual folks who are doing the work here.
Brian?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Corey. And that was my original intent, was to get a farmer who's organic and a farmer who's conventional, have them both there. But when we had Jackie Folsom in, we kind of ran this language by her and she was okay with it. But I see your point now that you mention it, and the emphasis seems to be on the organization, not on the actual person doing the farming. And I don't think that's what we want. I mean, maybe it is if the farmer doesn't choose to be part of it, or I don't know. Yeah.
Could it be something like an active farmer that is a member of the organization?
That's not bad.
So you have that concern about having an organizational entity that kind of potentially represents multiple viewpoints of its members, but you have the active farmer being the one that's the representative of the organization.
I think if there was just 2 out of the 13, that's pretty slim pickings, but that certainly clarifies it, Michael. I think that's a good suggestion. If committee okay with that language?
Yep. And then would you extend that to the vegetable and fruit people as well?
I guess for consistency, you'd probably want that.
Yeah.
And the grass-based non-dairy livestock too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that okay, guys?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, we'll plug that in then, Michael, and the next trip through, we'll probably change it again just for, give you something to do.
Okay. I'm just making notes.
Yeah. So are we in pretty good shape now with the makeup of the board, membership to the board?
I think so.
Yeah. Well,
the only question I have is having it all be appointed by the Secretary of Ag. Is there any consideration of having the secretaries of A&R and Ag collaborate or anything like that? We talk about that?
I don't know about that part. You could they'd have to collaborate with me as chair of the Senate Ag Committee. That would no. I don't know what the ag, would that be appropriate, Michael? Because this is pretty much in the ag agency, right?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It's established and it's attached to the Agency of Agriculture. So it's basically part of the agency. I think if you wanted to have the secretary after consultation with somebody, you could do that. But I think if you're gonna have the
Then-
entity, you either have the governor do it or the secretary.
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it for now. I want to think a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
that's worth thinking about.
Morning,
So-
Jackie.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Moving on to the next change.
Yeah,
It's in the powers and duties of the board. The agency proposed this revision to clarify what the surveys they will be doing regard. And so they will survey farmers from every county in the state to help better understand how ag inputs such as pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, and plastics are currently used, as well as current challenges farmers face in reducing these inputs in order to better inform recommendations to be provided in the annual report that goes to the General Assembly under subdivision 1.
and I think in number 10, see, I'm running out of machines, but on page 3, line 15, Margaret suggested that study and issues recommended regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture, establishing incentives for the use of such plastics in farming and renewable chemical production in Vermont. That it's a suggestion that she'd put forth. I don't know, if what the committee thinks about that suggestive change.
Let me read it again. I think I'm okay with it.
Where would it go? I'm not sure where would it go?
I think it's actually page 2,
Okay.
line 21. It would be subdivision 11 if you maintain all the rest of the subdivisions.
This would be new. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's based on the email that she sent around the other a little while ago.
Yeah. Does
I don't
that,
know what study and issue recommendations regarding renewable chemical production. I don't know what that means.
well, the other day, I think she testified to the fact that there are companies that are making this biodegradable product, and that, as well as collecting and trying to dispose of this stuff, we ought to be working toward encouraging farmers to use this, and because it could be disposed of, and it would, disappear in a period of time.
I totally get that. And that's what the first 2 things in her list are about: the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture, incentives for the use of biodegradable plastics in farming. But then
Bobby,
is it-
Margaret Lagis is available if you want her to sign on to give any feedback.
But is it production of renewable chemicals from the recycled biodegradable plastic? I guess I don't understand.
Well-
And at farming.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe we can have her
So,
come in and explain what she means by that phrase.
well, Linda, is Margaret in the waiting room?
He's waiting for an invitation. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure.
She'll be here momentarily.
We'll let anybody in our committee in. We aren't fussy, are we, Jackie?
No, and you have such a nice big room now, you can let everybody that you want in.
Good morning, Margaret.
Morning.
We were talking about your proposal, your change, and I think Chris had a question, and Michael,
Morning.
maybe Michael had the question.
Hang on, I gotta get off of one and there we go. All right, sorry.
So the question, there was a question on the purposes and the production of, and Michael, you want to ask, or Chris, your question? What are you shaking your head for? You taking care of the kids this week?
One or two things going on. We were trying to understand what in the world and renewable chemical production in Vermont meant.
Yes,
And
yeah,
wondering
so,
if that was vital.
yes. So the issue is that you can make renewable chemicals, which would be these biodegradable plastics is what you would call renewable chemicals. You can make them with pulp, with wood products, or with corn stalks. So you probably could make them with hemp as well. And so we'd like to encourage those businesses. I love having kids in the background. We would like to encourage or incentivize those businesses to be created in Vermont, because Vermont farmers use a lot of plastic, not only conventional farmers, but organic farmers. And so we would really like to not only incentivize farmers to use these products, but we'd love to establish or help establish those businesses in Vermont. It would be a great new use for pulpwood, which is, as you probably know, even though the price of lumber is high, the price of pulpwood is really low. And so it makes harvesting wood really not sustainable in Vermont right now. So we're just looking for all kinds of new ways to use either hemp or wood or corn stalks. So they're all, in some states, they're incentivizing corn, like in the Midwest, but Maine is incentivizing pulpwood. So they have language to incentivize the use of pulpwood to make these renewable chemistries.
Well, plus we could use the stalks off cannabis, right?
Correct. Yep. And so that's
Yeah.
hemp. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So could I recommend that it would say establishing incentives for the use of biodegradable plastics in farming and incentives for the production of biodegradable plastics and other similar renewable chemicals in Vermont?
So
Because I think if you tie that renewable chemical to the biodegradable plastic, you get an example of what a renewable chemical is. And so somebody's not out there, you're not out on the Senate floor arguing about whether chemicals are renewable, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay.
So we'll Michael, you'll fix that language up and add that. And committee's
Do we-
okay with
Yeah,
that?
I think that's okay. I guess I'm wondering, like, that doesn't seem like an annual exercise. I'm trying to look back, that's, I mean, it probably needs to be revisited, but I guess I wonder if
And on,
that fits.
well, I could see it. They are, say this year, there isn't anything out there for them to look at, but they ought to review it and find out that there isn't anything there. But between this year and next year, there may be some new products come along or new engineering that would allow something like this to take place. So how would you word that, Chris, if you?
Well, I'm not complaining about it. I just, if I'm looking at this with fresh eyes, it just sort of does stand out as more of a one-off question. But anyway, if it doesn't bother anybody else, it doesn't bother me. It just makes the draft a little bit clunky, maybe.
I think it is an ongoing changing technology. And so it is something that you might be presented with things on several different years. Like the seed review part of it is also definitely not going to be every year. That might only be every 5 or 6 years that one of those issues comes up. So it's kind of in the same line as some new technology comes along, this is probably the right place to look at that technology.
So, okay, Michael?
Okay. So moving down, I gotta go back to the website, sorry.
Thank
Um,
you, Margaret.
You're welcome.
That the next change would be on page 5, line 12, subsection D. This is what I referenced earlier on Friday. You asked to consolidate the seed review committee with the Agriculture Innovation Board. And in doing that, I just transferred over the authority of the seed review committee to the board. But the question has been raised, do you want them to have the regulatory authority that the seed review committee had? And specifically, it's that line, that sentence on pages 12, on page 5, lines 12 through 14, about whether prior to sale, distribution, or use in the state of a new genetically engineered seed, a majority of the board needs to approve the sale, distribution, or use of the seed. So the seed review committee does have this authority. It's effectively a regulatory approval process. And the question is, do you want the Ag Innovation Board to have that same authority?
Well, I think the purpose of moving this over, we didn't really talk about doing away with the regs, I don't think, as much as having everything, have this committee review the seeds. And I would, it says the majority of the board has to approve it. Well, wouldn't the majority have to make any, if they made any recommendations, it would take a majority.
That's correct.
So I would,
But I'll just show you that on page 11, I'm just parroting the language that's in the seed review committee right now. Well, not exactly. It's more, I just flipped the clause around, but it's the same authority. And so I'm not making any, I'm just putting this issue on the table for y'all.
Michael, excuse me.
yeah, Brian,
Currently, the seed authority, the seed committee, whatever it's called, has the authority to make this recommendation. And if we don't do what your language says in the current bill we're looking at, then nobody would have that authority, correct?
Well, right. So the prior to sale, distribution, or use in the state, that's really the key
Right.
phrase. You've given the Ag Innovation Board the authority to review to review the seed traits of new genetically engineered seed proposed for sale, distribution, or use in the state. But that's just it's basically advisory authority. It doesn't have the same regulatory trigger as the language in sub D.
but
Personally, I like having the regulatory trigger somewhere, personally.
I don't. I mean, I guess where I'm getting caught up is, does it need to be shall approve before, or can it be a may? I mean, what is the current? I don't want to give I saw consolidation. I didn't want to expand the scope of work, the power that.
Right, and I didn't intend to increase the scope. If you look at page 11, it says a majority of the seed review committee. So this is current law. A majority of the seed review committee must approve of the sale, distribution, or use of a new genetically engineered seed prior to sale, distribution, or use in the state. So there's already that regulatory trigger that's there. I played with the language a little bit, but it's the same concept. It's prior to sale, they shall approve must or shall. Generally, Ledge Council uses shall instead of must. But I'm just putting this on the table for y'all. I just did what I thought I was directed to do. I'll do whatever you want me to do here.
Well, I
mean-
don't see why if they would have to issue a recommend to the secretary, right?
Yes.
And I mean, that's what they're going to do with all of their other decisions that they come up with. And I would hope that this panel has the expertise in, so that the secretary would honor their suggestions. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this. And so, Chris?
But
Go ahead, Corey.
well, I was just going to say the final authority, in Bobby's questioning is with the secretary. But the way I read that, it seems like it reads that this committee has to approve it, not the secretary. So
Yeah,
is
but
there
I-
a way to clarify that they shall make a recommendation to the secretary, but it's still ultimately the secretary's decision?
Well, that was the nature of my question, is really where does the buck stop in current law and under some of this drafting?
Well, in
I've-
current law, doesn't it stop with the secretary, Michael?
No, I think that this is the way that current law is drafted. It's the seed review committee must approve by a majority the sale of that seed. And I do think this is a condition that let me back up. Before the secretary can assert the secretary's authority to authorize the sale of a seed, this committee has to approve it first. So I do agree that it's the secretary's ultimate decision, but before the secretary makes that decision, this group has to approve it.
But if this group doesn't approve it and the secretary, say
Then
it's a
the
split
secretary-
vote,
Right.
can the secretary still approve it?
No, I would say no, the way that this is drafted.
Isn't that true with about everything in this bill?
No.
No, because for example, you're switching the Ag Innovation Board into the role of the Pesticide Advisory Council. The Pesticide Advisory Council
Yeah.
makes recommendations generally. And it's the secretary's determination. For the treated articles, the Pesticide Advisory Council and now the Ag Innovation Board needs to make a kind of triggering decision, but that's the only one where it's not otherwise a recommend or advise.
Yeah,
I just want us to remember that the language we're talking about right now that Michael put in this proposal is current law. We're not changing anything by approving this language that we're talking about. We're just moving it over from one committee to another committee.
That is, I believe, that's my interpretation. I did change how it read, but
Right.
the effect is the same.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just one man's opinion. With the Innovation Board, you've got a much wider group though. And I would prefer to have the secretary have the final say. They could make recommendations about what could be sold. And in other words, if you take a look at that section, starting on line 12, and you just take out that first sentence, the rest of it makes a lot of sense. In order to ensure the appropriate use or traits, et cetera, the Agricultural Innovation Board may propose to the secretary limits or conditions on the sale, distribution, and use continue. So, because I don't know, it seems weird that the board can override the secretary.
Well, that's current law.
Well, that, I think we just passed that though, a year or two ago, I think, didn't we?
2018, I think.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But it's historically been that way. We made some changes in 2018, I thought.
No, I think the seed review committee was 2018.
Yeah,
At least-
I don't think we ever dealt with this much in the past until last year or the last biennium.
I remember this debate more specifically in the House.
Well,
And I don't remember much of, but it's not that it didn't happen. I just don't remember it.
and well, I would think that we would want to be consistent in our bill, but it's up to you guys. You want to be consistent or have this section changed?
Could I ask Michael a question? There seems to be two things here. There's the prior to sale they got to approve, but then there's this second part that begins on the end of line 14. In order to ensure the appropriate use of traits of a new genetically engineered seed, that's more limited, right? And that's where they may make recommendations.
Right.
Secretary is the secretary wed to those recommendations, or it's just they can recommend and good luck?
Those would just be recommends. Because if you look at, and you might not have all of it in front of you, the duties and authority of the secretary regarding the regulation of seeds, the secretary shall establish rules, the secretary shall establish standards. That's the authority of the secretary. So if you took out that they have to approve or by a majority prior to sale distribution, what the seed review committee would be doing would be recommending to the secretary whether or not to have any of those limits on the sale, distribution, or use of seed, et cetera.
I'm supportive of that. Me personally, I would support them making a recommendation to the secretary.
Same here.
I think
Yeah.
I'm supportive of the closer to the status quo, which is what the draft here seems to be.
I don't see any reason why we would want to weaken the statute as it is. I think keeping the language that Michael put in makes the most sense. Otherwise, we're taking a step backwards.
You guys aren't being very nice this morning.
Say Bobby's got to earn his paycheck today.
Well, you know, I don't know of any ground that would be in between either yes or no. That you could put maybe, but no, I do think we could run into trouble. See, this is new language that we're adding. And I haven't talked with the House in regards to, you know, their feelings about this. So I guess to give them a opportunity to weigh in. Yeah, do you have a suggestion, Chris?
Well, I had a question. What in the House passed language, Michael? What happens with this? This just falls to staff and the secretary?
So the House passed language doesn't consolidate the seed review committee with the Ag Innovation Board. The seed review committee would remain as it is under the seed law.
Interesting.
So they would still
Yeah.
have that power to say no or
They
whatever.
would still have, the existing law would remain the same.
Well,
You
I
hear
think,
testimony that the agency wanted it collapsed, or where did that idea come from?
no, what we decided was instead of having different boards all over the place, we would consolidate that seed review committee into this proposal to try to streamline the business of the ag agency to one committee dealing with our soils and groundwater and
Did-
new products and the whole nine
It's-
yards.
Is,
Carrie,
rather
I brought it up, Chris, and Carrie, basically, it's a lot of the same expertise on the same committee doing very similar work. So, we'd end up with likely the same people on, both. And so, just consolidating the effort, if you will.
He supported it.
what about, did you do anything with isn't there a pollinator advisory that's in the same sort of vein a little bit?
I think the pollinator committee, I think they were time limited. I have to check on that. I think they might be gone.
There was
Well,
a sunset built into that.
Mhm.
If you're looking to consolidate it, then I don't see why we would also pull back their power. I mean, if we should consolidate, let's consolidate it. If otherwise, because for me, where I'm coming from is it's all a little murky, and now suddenly we're consolidating and talking about retreating on the power. That doesn't feel right. I'd rather just leave it alone over there. But if you want to consolidate it, don't step backwards.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm still supportive of, because I think the makeup of this innovation board is wide enough that you're going to get enough discussion on a particular seed that maybe that original seed committee wouldn't have had. So I still like just taking that one sentence out on line 12 and leaving it, let it go.
Well, Corey?
I don't have
No.
anything to add, and my position hasn't changed.
Yeah. Well, we can leave that in and deal with the House and let them deal with it on their side and see how it goes over there.
Okay.
So no change to the language that's in front of you right now?
Not at this point.
Okay.
We'll talk about it maybe later.
Okay. Should I move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so section 2 repeals the pesticide advisory council change there. Section 3 shifts the Ag Innovation Board into the VPIC's role of providing advice to the secretary on designating acceptable controls for products. Same with section 4, Ag Innovation Board takes over VPIC's authority about the advising the secretary on the sale, use, storage, treatment, and disposal of pesticides. Section 5 is the Ag Innovation Board recommending record-keeping requirements for pesticide dealers and applicators, and then recommending rules for the regulation of pesticides. Section 6 is the treated articles provision. This is where the Ag Innovation Board, upon recommendation of the Ag Innovation Board, so there's a trigger built into treated articles, may adopt rules regarding best management practices, standards, etc. for treated articles. See that change throughout there. Section 7, this is the seed review law, which is changing, and the seed review committee under 6 VSA 642 would be struck, moved to the Ag Innovation Board, consolidated with the Ag Innovation Board. Section 8 is the implementation. The Secretary of Ag appoints the members of the board but on or before January 1, 2022. And then Section 9, the act takes effect January 1, 2022, except that the authority of the secretary to appoint members to the board takes effect on July 1, 2021, so that the new board will be in existence when VPIC expires.
Any questions on those last sections from anyone? Anthony?
I'm not sure if this is a question or not, but it seems like what we're doing in some of those sections in the end there, we're basically doing away with the Pesticide Advisory Council, obviously, bringing some of their work, I guess, to the Innovation Board. I don't know whether work is the right word, but some of their things. And I've heard from a couple of people who have made the case that the Pesticide Advisory Board had a more targeted task, which basically set targets to begin to reduce the use of pesticides. And they've suggested keeping that language from the VPEC board into this Ag Innovation Board. It's a paragraph. What I want to do is take the opportunity to tell you briefly what it is, and then we could send it around and look at it and see if it seems appropriate. But basically, it would have the Ag Innovation Board recommend targets with respect to the state goal of achieving an overall reduction in use of pesticides, et cetera. Targets should take into consideration at a minimum the following: A, reducing the amount of acreage where pesticides are used; B, reducing the risk associated with use of pesticides; C, increasing the acreage managed by means of integrated pest management techniques; D, decreasing within each level of comparable risk the quantity of pesticides applied per acre, and making recommendations regarding the implementation of other management practices that result in decreased pesticide use. So basically, it's a more targeted approach to looking at targets that would help us reduce use of pesticides. And it's in the Pesticide Advisory Council now, board now. And the idea would be to integrate that language into what we're looking at, so that it would be more clear about setting these targets to reduce use of pesticides. I don't know if people want to get that specific or not. I think it makes sense, but obviously I'm just one person here.
Well, yeah, I would have expected though, the House, when they put this together, they must have heard from a ton of people. And they opted not to include all the stuff that you just spoke about. Do you know, Michael, if they heard from people and talked about the duties and responsibilities of the older crew that used to do this?
They definitely had witnesses. I wasn't there for all of the witness testimony. So I don't know if I don't know the full suite of people that testified on the bill. I'm trying to look at the House website. The only document written testimony I see is from Jared Carpenter, but I'm pretty sure they had more witnesses than that.
Well, they have a lot of duties already, this new innovation board, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to make that point, Mr. Chair, that right on page 1, like the first or second charge is to recommend practices that reduce the use of and exposure to pesticides and synthetic fertilizers in order to protect soil biology, human health, and environmental health. So to me, that's already covered in the bill.
But that was my question. so it's sort of addressed there, but it sounds like the specifics of your proposal, Senator Polina, is around targets. Is that right?
Yeah, setting some targets that would basically make it more specific as to what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to go about achieving it. I'm a little concerned that, we had the Pesticide Advisory Council, which people admit did not do a good job of what it was supposed to do. People didn't show up for meetings and whatnot, but I don't want us to forget the idea that the initial target of or focus of what we're talking about doing was reducing the use of pesticides. And now we're giving this Innovation Council a broader agenda and more things to do. But I don't want the issue around pesticide reduction to get lost in the shuffle. I want it to be as clear as possible.
But that isn't mentioned up above, Brian, where you just read.
Not specifically, but my view, I guess, is why bother creating this innovation board if we don't trust them to do, what we ask them to do? To me, by setting targets, we're kind of micromanaging.
Well, we're not setting the targets. But,
No,
but it is,
They would set the targets.
it is the second duty of the board is to recommend practices that reduce the use.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I thought we were covering that base, early on and I think, if we had mentioned, if that wasn't mentioned earlier, I would say, well, we could go back and add more in, but I think we're going in the right direction here to try to convince the users of these things to use less. And I know some people say, well, the old board, we picked up volumes of extra fertilizers but we ought to give them an opportunity to show their stuff. And if we come back in a year or two and the numbers are still climbing instead of stabilizing or being reduced, let the next crew that does our work tighten it up tighter. So Michael, you've got a few changes to redo and rework.
Could I quickly ask whether Jackie feels like we hit the sweet spot with I assume that's why she joined us, about the adding the active farmer phrase.
Yeah, we changed the makeup. Were you on when we were talking about that, Jackie? And if
Yes,
you
I
were,
was.
what's your feeling in regards to that?
Thank you very much, Senator Starr. We would agree with the changes that you're proposing to make. I think the original purpose of us testifying was that we wanted all the language to be the same as far as the seeding. And it would never be Farm Bureau's proposal to not set a farmer on a committee like this. So changing it so that the onus is on making sure it's an active farmer would be as preferable as making sure that it was an organization. We were just looking for continuity on the seating. So we would support the change to make sure that as often as possible, it would be a farmer that would be in those seats. So thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
And what about the bill in general? Are you somewhat happy with that, or?
You've had a great discussion. Yeah, I think the changes that you've made, you always have great discussions with children or not, Senator Pearson. Usually I have a dog barking in the background. No, I think the changes that you've made are good. I like the discussions about how many boards should you try to fold into this. And I think standing a line on some of the others. This is always open to interpretation next year. If there are other boards or councils that you may see could benefit from being in the within the group, then you can always add those in later. But I think it's been a good discussion, and we continue to support the bill with the changes that you've made.
Yep. Margaret, are you still on?
I am.
Yeah. I know we added some stuff that you'd requested and deleted some portions of some stuff you suggested.
Yep.
But to move the bill forward, well, we've got to go through it again, maybe as early as tomorrow. But how do you think things are going so far?
I like the idea that you are allowing an active farmer to sit on the board, just like Jackie said. I think that's really important to have somebody that's actually going to be required to do this work on a daily basis is really helpful, other than just somebody who works for one of the organizations. Obviously, Bio feels very strongly that any decisions on GEC traits should rest with the secretary. And that's mainly because the secretary is the regulator and will have to put into place anything that's, any decision that's made. But just as importantly, we do think that the Ag Innovation Board, you could change that instead of saying may make recommendations or restrictions on the use to shall make, that before the sale of any new GEC trait, the Ag Innovation Board shall make recommendations to the secretary, but that all final decisions would rest with the secretary, because that's where the expertise, the final expertise really lies, with all of they sit on all of the national pesticide organizations, et cetera, and they're going to be the regulator. So they should be the ones with the final say, in our opinion. But other than that, we like the makeup of the board. We appreciate that it's wider. We also really appreciate that you added the renewable chemistry language. We do think that that's a potential new area of business in Vermont, as well as the fact that agricultural plastics are a big burden on our landfills, and we are always looking for ways to reduce that, because we don't want to be building more landfills in Vermont just because we want to reduce the use of pesticides, and then reducing the use of pesticides often is replaced with the extra use of plastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Margaret. And I think we've got a meeting at noon coming up, guys, or some of us have. 3 of us have anyways. You guys, when do you have your meeting? Oh, you are, no, this morning you had your meeting.
We can have ours at like a little coffee shop for a small group.
Coffee shop, we can have it at a table.
Well, sometimes, guys, you want to feel lucky. It's a lot easier to get 6 or 7 to agree than it is 22 or 23.
You guys seem to make it look easier than we do.
But anyways, is there anything else that any of you would like to or suggest that Michael could do? We have that miscellaneous bill up tomorrow, but we ought to try to get 434 wrapped up this week as well, and more so than 420. I think it's more important to get 420, to get 434 rolling than the miscellaneous bill. We can, try to get it out maybe by the end of the week or Tuesday of next week. But for this one here, I'd like to get out by the end of this week.
Okay.
Chris, I just want to follow.
Pardon?
I was gonna say, Chris, I was looking for our bill and finance with the current use piece. I didn't see it on your schedule at all this week. Are you guys taking it up?
You've you know more about our schedule this week than I do. We are cranking on broadband.
Okay. You just let me know when it comes up if they need me to come in.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I assume finance will. Broadband's our last sort of committee lift, and then we start cranking on all the other bills that have come in.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you think does Ann have any type of an order or?
If it's something of a mystery to me, but feel free to reach out and ask her. I don't think there's any reason to think it's not going to be taken up.
Well, I
We've
mean,
referred 4 or 5 bills recently, and so we're eager to crank through broadband and then get to them.
well, it should take committee about 5 minutes to vote that one out. But anyway,
Just to be fair, Mr. Chair, it'll take an extra 5 minutes because people will assume that you're pulling a fast one in some way. So I'll have to underline that,
well,
then we'll get to it.
you just tell them that I'm very capable of that, and if they don't vote it, they may get one. But anyways, I think we'll adjourn the meeting and move on to our next meeting. So
Okay.
with that, thanks a lot, guys. Thank Mike.